Her Imperial Highness Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia, the Duchess of Edinburgh, the Duchess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and the Dowager Duchess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, the Dowager Duchess of Edinburgh. She was born on the 17th of October 1853 at the Alexander Palace, St. Petersburg, Russia. She died on the 24th of October 1920, aged 67, in Zurich, Switzerland. Her husband was Alfred, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and Duke of Edinburgh. They had 5 children together: Alfred Alexander Wilhelm Ernst Albert, hereditary Prince of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha; Maria Alexandra Victoria, Queen of Romania; Victoria Melita, Princess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha; Alexandra Louise Olga Victoria, Princess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha; and Beatrice Leopoldine Victoria, Princess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Her father was Tsar Alexander II of Russia. Her mother was Marie of Hesse and by Rhine. She is of the house of Holstein, Gotha, Romanov. Her full name is Maria Alexandrovna Romanova. She was the 6th child and only surviving daughter among the 8 children of Emperor Alexander II and his wife Marie of Hesse and by Rhine. The Grand Duchess grew up as the only girl with 4 older brothers and 2 younger ones. Surrounded only by brothers, Maria grew up as a tomboy with an independent character and strong will. She did not know her only sister, Grand Duchess Alexandra, who had died before she was born. Maria Alexandrovna herself almost died from a throat disease at the age of 7. Her childhood was spent in luxury and splendour in the large palaces and country estates around Russia. The family's main residence was the 1,600-room Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. In the summer, the family stayed at Peterhof, a large complex with farms, cottages, and various pavilions on the Gulf of Finland. In the children's island located in the park of the Alexander Palace, Maria had her own private little house, off limits to adults, which she used with her brothers as a playhouse. Her father added a farm built for her enjoyment when she was 8 years old. Both parents doted on her. For Tsar Alexander II, she was his favourite child and enjoyed spending time with her. The Empress was a loving mother, but physically cold towards her children. The Tsarina suffered from weak lungs and had to travel constantly to Germany and southern Europe to escape the harsh Russian winters. Maria was educated at the Russian court under the strict regime of her governess, Countess Alexandrine Tolstoy. Maria was the first Russian Grand Duchess to be raised by English nannies. In August 1867, while the imperial family was at the Levadia Palace in Crimea. Mark Twain met Maria Alexandrovna and her parents. The famous American writer described her as blue-eyed, unassuming and pretty. Twain noticed the influence that the young Grand Duchess had over her father. She is abundantly genuine and never changes in front of strangers, observed her lady-in-waiting. She is accustomed to be the centre of the world and that everybody yields to her, commenting that one cannot treat her roughly or reason with her. During a visit to her maternal relatives, the Princes of Battenberg, in August 1868, Maria, then 15 years old, met Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh. Prince Alfred, Queen Victoria's second son, was a shy and handsome young man with a career in the British Navy. Alfred's voyage around the world with the Royal Navy kept him away, travelling for the next 2 years. Maria and Prince Alfred saw each other again in the summer of 1871, when Alexander II and his wife visited the Battenbergs again. They were accompanied by 17-year-old Maria and her 2 elder brothers. Alfred also happened to be there, along with the Prince and Princess of Wales. During that summer, Maria and Alfred felt attached to each other, spending their days walking and talking together. They had a common love of music, and Alfred was an enthusiastic amateur violinist, while Maria played the piano. Although they wished to marry, no engagement was announced, and Alfred returned to England. Their parents were against the match. Alexander II did not want to lose his only daughter, to whom he was deeply attached. He presented his daughter's youth as the main obstacle and suggested a waiting period of at least 1 year before any decision should be made. The Tsar also objected to a British son-in-law due to the anti-English feeling in Russia following the Crimea War. The Tsarina regarded the British customs as peculiar and the English people as cold and unfriendly. She was convinced that her daughter would not be happy there. However, marriage negotiations began in July 1871. Queen Victoria was also against the match. No British prince had ever married a Romanov, and she foresaw problems with Maria's Orthodox religion and Russian upbringing. The Queen considered that Russia was generally unfriendly towards Britain. Victoria was also suspicious about Russian moves in the direction of India. There were rumours going about St. Petersburg that Maria had compromised herself with the Tsar's aide-de-camp, and her family were anxious to see her settled. Alfred refused to believe those rumours, and he was prepared to fight to marry the woman he loved. Queen Victoria therefore swallowed her pride and said nothing. Both mothers continued to look for other partners for their children, but Alfred and Maria would have no one else. On the 11th of July, Alfred asked for her hand in marriage, and she accepted. He was nearly 29, she 19. He sent a telegram to his mother saying, "Maria and I were engaged this morning. Cannot say how happy I am. Hope your blessing rests on us." The Queen sent her congratulations, but confided her misgivings in her diary. On the 11th of July 1873 she wrote, "Not knowing Maria and realising that there may still be many difficulties, my thoughts and feelings are rather mixed." Tsar Alexander granted his daughter the staggering sum of £100,000 as a dowry, plus an annual allowance of £32,000. He also bestowed on his daughter some of the best jewels owned by the Romanovs, including the sapphires he had inherited from his mother, Empress Alexandra Feodorovna, as well as the parure that had belonged to Catherine the Great. As a wedding present, the Tsar commissioned a complete parure of diamonds and Burmese rubies from the court jeweller Boleyn. For his part, Alfred was made honorary chief of a Russian Guards regiment and even had a Russian battleship named after him. A week after the engagement, the proposed Anglo-Russian alliance experienced its first crisis. Queen Victoria asked the Tsar to bring Maria to Scotland so she could meet her future daughter-in-law. Alexander refused. The Tsarina suggested that they all meet in Cologne instead. The Queen called it simply impertinent that I, who have been nearly 20 years longer on the throne than the Emperor of Russia and who am a reigning sovereign, should be ready to run to the slightest call of the mighty Russians, like any little princess. Victoria also made herself unpopular by refusing the Tsar's offer to make the Prince of Wales colonel of a Russian regiment, and by demanding that an Anglican marriage service held in St. Petersburg alongside the Orthodox ceremony. But Maria looked forward happily to her marriage. She said, "How happy I am to belong to him. I feel that my love for him is growing daily. I have a feeling of peace and inexpressible happiness, and a boundless impatience to be altogether his own." On the 4th of January 1874, Alfred arrived in St. Petersburg for the wedding and stayed in the Winter Palace. The other British guests arrived on the 18th of January. The wedding was celebrated in great splendour at the Grand Church of the Winter Palace on the 23rd of January. Queen Victoria was represented by her eldest son, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, and his wife Alexandra, sister of Tsarina Maria Feodorovna of Russia. The Queen's eldest daughter, Victoria, and her husband Frederick, Crown Prince of Germany, were also present. The marriage ceremony consisted of two parts. The Orthodox service took place first in the Imperial Chapel. Maria wore a silver and gem-set sarafan, a traditional dress worn by Russian imperial brides, a glittering coronet, and a mantle of crimson velvet trimmed with ermine, and a sprig of myrtle specially sent by Queen Victoria, with the traditional kokoshnik headdress. Queen Victoria's lady-in-waiting, Lady Augusta Stanley, wrote in a letter to the Queen that her new daughter-in-law's head must have ached with the immense weight of jewels, and the necklace of diamonds, the most beautiful I ever saw. Alfred wore the uniform of the Royal Navy. The Tsar looked pale throughout the entire ceremony and said afterwards, "It is for happiness, but the light of my life has gone out." After this, the bride and groom each drank thrice from a goblet of wine. The service concluded with the couple joining hands under the priest's stole. Then they all proceeded to the Alexander Hall, where Arthur Stanley, Dean of Westminster, made Prince Alfred and Maria Alexandrovna man and wife, according to the rites of the Church of England. In London that night, Queen Victoria wore the Order of St. Catherine on her dress and drank a toast to the young couple. A Major General Sir Howard Elphinstone said that in one room supper was served for 500 people at 50 different tables, with palms and exotics used to so large an extent that it gave the appearance of a conservatory. The heat of the rooms was almost unbearable, and several ladies left the ballroom in a fainting state. Lady Augusta Stanley summed up the wedding in 3 words: "What a day!" Alfred and Maria spent their wedding night at the Alexander Palace. Alexander II had ordered a lavish honeymoon suite on the ground floor, hoping that it would persuade the young couple to remain in Russia. After a short honeymoon, however, Alfred and Maria left Russia to live in England. Alexander never lost hope that they would return, and the honeymoon suite was kept preserved for the next 2 decades. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh arrived in England on the 7th of March 1874. The town of Windsor was decorated in their honour with Union Jacks and Russian flags, and Maria was given a great welcome by the waiting crowds. Queen Victoria met them at the South-Western Station and recorded their arrival in her journal. "I took dear Maria in my arms and kissed her warmly several times. I was quite nervous and trembling, so long had I been in expectation. Dear Maria has a very friendly manner and a pleasant face, beautiful skin and fine bright eyes. She speaks English wonderfully well." Later on, Queen Victoria described her new daughter-in-law as most pleasing, natural, affectionate and civil, even if I have formed a high opinion of her. The Queen also noted that Maria was not a bit afraid of Alfie, and I hope will have the very best influence on him. The Duke and Duchess made their public entry into London on the 12th of March. Thousands lined the route from Paddington Station to Buckingham Palace to get a glimpse of the new British princess. Alfred and Maria moved into Clarence House in London, which was their main residence in England. Here she had an Orthodox chapel installed for her and her Russian priest she had brought from St. Petersburg. In addition, they had a country residence in Eastwell Park, a large estate of 2,500 acres near Ashford in Kent, where the Duke enjoyed hunting parties. Maria arrived in England with the intention of making a success of her life in her adopted country, but she found it difficult to settle at the British court. For her, the climate was detestable and the food bland, and she found Clarence House gloomy and dull. She described London as an impossible place where people are mad of pleasure and are let down compared to the broad streets, golden domes and magnificent palaces of St. Petersburg. In her eyes, Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle could never compete with the splendours of the Winter Palace. Constant visits to her mother-in-law at Windsor Castle and Osborne in the Isle of Wight were tedious. The Queen's company was oppressive, the late nights were tiring, and her husband was a philanderer. Of her sisters and brother-in-law, she only cared for the youngest, Prince Leopold and Princess Beatrice. Proud of her strong intellect, she considered Alexandra the Princess of Wales a light-minded and foolish woman who cared only for her looks. Although she loved music, the Duchess did not like the Royal Albert Hall, describing it as quite boring and every concert goes on for hours. The Duchess often squabbled with her mother-in-law on how she should be addressed at court. As the Tsar's only daughter, she had precedence over all the Grand Duchesses in Russia. She was surprised to discover that she had to yield to the Princess of Wales and all of Queen Victoria's daughters, and insisted on taking precedence before all. She considered the Princess of Wales's family, the Danish royal family, as inferior to her own. Tsar Alexander alleged that his daughter should continue to be styled as Imperial Highness, not royal. He said, as all in civilized countries. Queen Victoria replied she did not care whether imperial was used or not, as long as royal came first. Queen Victoria refused the demand that Maria take precedence before the Princess of Wales, yet granted her precedence immediately after her. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh quickly started a family. Just 9 months after their wedding, the Duchess gave birth to a son, young Alfred, born in Buckingham Palace on the 15th of October 1874. Her mother, the Tsarina, came to London to visit her daughter and meet her grandson. In the following years, the family kept growing. A daughter was born on the 29th of October 1875 at Eastwell Park. She was named Maria after her mother and grandmother. While the Duchess was in Malta with her husband, who was stationed there as an officer in the Royal Navy, Maria gave birth to a second daughter, Victoria Melita, on the 25th of November 1876. After their return in 1877, Russia went to war with Turkey in an attempt to gain control of the Balkans. Queen Victoria sent Tsar Alexander a series of aggressive telegrams that almost led to a state of war between the two countries. The Duchess was deeply shocked at her mother-in-law's hostility towards her country, and her own father as well. The relationship between the Duchess of Edinburgh and her mother-in-law deteriorated. Maria Alexandrovna openly became an Anglophobe, which is somebody who says they openly detest Britain. The Duke of Edinburgh was the heir of his childless uncle Ernst II, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, the eldest brother of Prince Albert, his father. After the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878, Maria resided in Coburg as her husband was expected to succeed his aging uncle. While in Germany, a third daughter, Alexandra, was born on the 1st of September 1878 in Coburg. On the 13th of October 1879, the Duchess gave birth prematurely to a stillborn son at Eastwell Park. On the 17th of February 1880, Maria was back in Russia during the 25th anniversary celebration of her father's coronation. That day, radicals attempted to assassinate the Tsar and the entire imperial family. A terrorist bomb demolished the dining room and the guard room of the Winter Palace. Maria returned to Russia again in 1880 to be with her dying mother. Empress Maria died on the 3rd of June 1880, aged 55. She was buried with full dignity, with her children present and remembered for her wisdom and grace. She was back in England at Clarence House when her father was killed by a terrorist bomb. She had to rush back to Russia to attend her father's funeral in St. Petersburg in March 1881. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were presented at the coronation of her brother, Tsar Alexander III, in Moscow in May 1883. Their family was completed with the birth of a fourth daughter, Princess Beatrice, born at Eastwell on the 20th of April 1884. Years later, the Duchess lamented her failure to have more children. She said, "The only real heavenly moment is the birth of the child. This cannot be compared to anything else. I think if I had even a dozen children, I would have kept the same feeling." Alfred was the heir to the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, expecting to be the Duchess there. Maria Alexandrovna had a palace built for her family in Coburg. The building known as the Edinburgh Palais was built across the centre square from the Edinburgh Palace, the official residence of the reigning Duke. As a reminder of Russia, Maria organised entertainment in the Russian fashion. In January 1886, the Duke was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the British Mediterranean Fleet based in Malta. In October 1886, the family settled there. For the next 3 years, they spent every winter at the San Anton Palace in Malta. Life in the island was unexciting for the Duchess, but it was a welcome respite from living in England. While in Malta, the Duchess proved to be an excellent hostess, entertaining naval officers and their wives. In 1887, the couple returned briefly to London to take part in Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. Her husband's career in the British Navy and their many relations in the European courts allowed Maria to travel extensively, something that she truly enjoyed. She visited most European countries, including Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, Greece, and even Montenegro, making annual trips to Germany, England, and Russia. In March 1887, the Duke relinquished his command of the Mediterranean Fleet and the family moved to Coburg. Their main residence was the Palais Edinburgh, where the Duchess held court. Her husband, occupied with his naval affairs, was away most of the time. Responsibility for the education of the couple's 5 children fell upon the Duchess. With the passing of the years, Alfred and Maria grew apart. They had little in common other than a shared interest in music and their children. He was reserved, moody, ill-tempered, and a heavy drinker. By the mid-1880s, he was an alcoholic. The Duke was described as rude, touchy, willful, unscrupulous, imprudent, and unfaithful. The Duchess resented her husband's attitude, but kept her marriage going, hiding her troubled marriage life from her children, providing a happy environment for them. Arguments over the children added to the couple's marital problems. The Duke hoped that their eldest daughter, Marie, would marry his nephew, the future King George V. The Duchess, however, was determined that her daughter should avoid her mistake. When George proposed to her, Marie informed him that the marriage was impossible and that he must remain her beloved chum. Queen Victoria later commented that Georgie lost Missy by waiting and waiting. The Duchess of Edinburgh suggested that Marie meet Ferdinand of Romania. They first became acquainted during a gala dinner, and the pair conversed in German. She found him shy but amiable, and their second meeting went just as well. Once the pair were formally engaged, Queen Victoria wrote to another granddaughter, Princess Victoria of Hesse and by Rhine, that Ferdinand is nice and the parents are charming, but the country is very insecure. Of course, the marriage will be delayed for some time, as Missy won't be 17 till the end of October. On the 10th of January 1893, Marie and Ferdinand were married. 9 months after the wedding, her first grandchild was born, Prince Carol. On the death of his uncle, Ernst II, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, on the 22nd of August 1893, the Duke of Edinburgh inherited the vacant throne. His elder brother, the Prince of Wales, had deferred his right to the succession. Upon her husband's accession to the ducal throne, Maria Alexandrovna became Duchess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, in addition to being Duchess of Edinburgh. Unlike her husband, Maria thoroughly enjoyed her new role. She said she found the country charming, and the prospect of a new fine position with plenty to do a real godsend. Alfred and Maria's second daughter, Victoria Melita and Ernst Louis, Grand Duke of Hesse, bowed to their family's pressure and married on the 19th of April 1894. The Duchess was initially against the match, as Ernst was close to his British grandmother, Queen Victoria, who arrived at Coburg with many other royals for the wedding. The pair's only living child, Princess Elizabeth, was born 11 months later. Victoria and Ernst proved incompatible. Victoria despaired of her husband's lack of affection towards her, while Ernst devoted much of his attention to their daughter, who he adored. The Duchess said she believed in marrying her daughters young, before they began to think for themselves. At the end of 1895, she arranged Alexandra's engagement to Ernst, hereditary Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Queen Victoria complained that she was too young. Alexandra's father objected to the status of his future son-in-law. It was not considered a brilliant match. Ernst was a grandson of Queen Victoria's sister, Princess Feodora of Leiningen. The wedding took place on the 20th of April 1896 in Coburg, Germany. Alexandra was 17 and Ernst 32. Their first child was born 13 months later, Prince Gottfried, on the 24th of March 1897. In June 1897, the Duchess and her husband went back to London to take part in Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. By then, the couple's relationship had deteriorated further. Maria Alexandrovna despaired in finding a topic of conversation with her difficult husband, as he hated her interest in literature and the theatre, while she found his fondness of politics and hunting dull. The Duchess was relieved when her husband was away. She wrote to her eldest daughter, "If only you knew how easy and comfortable life is without him." By 1898, the Duke's health had deteriorated, made worse by his excessive smoking and heavy drinking. On the 23rd of January 1899, Maria and her husband celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Absent from the festivities was their only son, who was gravely ill. Young Alfred was a junior officer in Potsdam, where his chief hobbies were gambling, drinking, and womanizing. In 1892, at the age of 17, he had contracted syphilis, and by 1898, his health had deteriorated rapidly. He died at the age of 24 on the 6th of February 1899 after shooting himself in the head in the midst of his parents' anniversary celebrations. The tragedy drove the parents further apart, as Alfred blamed his wife, who had been responsible for young Alfred's education. In her grief, the Duchess sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably during her son's funeral. Alfred's cancer of the throat was too advanced for any treatment. By May 1900, he was unable to swallow and could only be fed by a tube. He died on the 30th of July 1900. After the death of her husband, she stayed for a while in England, where she had to relinquish Clarence House, which was inherited by her brother-in-law, the Duke of Connaught. Maria Alexandrovna was at Osborne House during the final days of her mother-in-law, Queen Victoria. Although she was critical of her daughters, she supported them during their personal crisis. In 1901, her second daughter, Victoria Melita, returned home early and caught her husband in bed with a male servant. She did not make her accusations public, but told her sister that no boy was safe, from the stable hands to the kitchen help. He slept quite openly with them all. She divorced her husband and came to live with her mother. Her grandchild, Elizabeth, the daughter of Victoria Melita, died at the age of 8 of typhoid fever during a November 1903 visit to Tsar Nicholas II and his family at their Polish hunting lodge. Victoria Melita and Grand Duke Kirill of Russia became close. The relationship was discouraged by his parents. Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna told Kirill to keep Victoria as his mistress and marry someone else. But Kirill was determined to marry Victoria. He wrote in his memoirs, "To those over whom the shadow of death has passed, life has a new meaning. It is like daylight, and I was now within visible reach of fulfillment of the dream of my life. Nothing would cheat me of it now. I had gone through much. Now at least the future lay radiant before me." The couple married on the 8th of October 1905 in a simple ceremony. The Dowager Duchess's relationship with her nephew, Tsar Nicholas II, deteriorated as he opposed Victoria Melita's second marriage and doomed the romance between Princess Beatrice and his younger brother, Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich. In November 1903, Michael wrote to Beatrice telling her that he could not marry her. On the 15th of July 1909, Princess Beatrice married Alfonso, Duke of Galliera. 9 months later, the couple's first child, Alvaro, was born on the 20th of April 1910. At the outbreak of World War I, Maria Alexandrovna was in Coburg after returning from a visit to King George V in Buckingham Palace. Her sympathies were divided, but she sided with Germany against her native Russia. To avoid complications, Maria Alexandrovna stayed away from Coburg, retiring to Bavaria. At one point, while she was returning home with her daughters, their car was stopped by an angry mob who recognised her and harassed her for her Russian heritage. It took the police over an hour to extricate them from the station. In August 1917, she wrote, "At the age of 63, I am very fresh in mind, if not in body, and I can support with patience and resignation a sad and perhaps miserable end of life, which is in store for my old age. Sometimes I also seem to despair, but not about myself, but about the state of things in general." In the aftermath of the war, Maria lost her large fortune as the bulk of it was held in trust in Russia. Her British income was very small. She was forced to sell a great part of her jewellery collection. In July 1920, she wrote, "I am too utterly disgusted with the present state of the world and mankind in general They have destroyed and ruined my beloved Russia and my much-loved Germany. She was a broken woman. Her figure, always plump, became thin, and her hands trembled. Although she had been affected by gastric troubles, her death came unexpectedly 8 days after her 67th birthday, on the 25th of October 1920, the only child of Tsar Alexander II to survive the Russian Revolution died in her sleep of a heart attack. She was profoundly religious, her elder daughter wrote. I hope God will not disappoint her, as most things and beings did in her life. And this concludes the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please click the like button, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe for future videos. Thank you.